I'm Mike Govoni, and for the last 15 years, I've been in recovery from addiction and on the deepest quest to find healing, to experience my own unique wholeness beyond the story of what happened to me. By taking an integrative, holistic approach to experience transformation, I bring you the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast, a show dedicated to people in recovery who are looking to experience deeper healing and transformation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. If this is your first time listening, then welcome. To share a little bit about myself, I am one of your peers in long-term recovery, and it's only from my pain and having to find healing that I'm able to bring my gift in the form of service to you. As one of my mentors says, our trauma is a prerequisite to our purpose. So helping people like you in the recovery community experience optimal health, thrive in relationship, and feel good in your body, all while staying sober is my goal. One of the ways I do this is by offering my one-on-one coaching program called Healing Beyond Recovery, where I help clients take an integrative, holistic approach to their life in recovery. You can find out more about me and my program on my webpage at www.mikegovoni.com. There you can also sign up for my bi-weekly vlog. And now for the important stuff. Today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. David Richo. Dr. Richo has been an intricate part of my own healing journey, and I can't wait to share all his wisdom with you today. I contacted Dr. Richo actually right before I was about to engage to my fiance, and Dave helped me navigate these choppy waters to now be in a very, very, very healthy relationship with my fiance and soon to be wife. So Dave's work, his wisdom is amazing. And to dive right in and tell you a little bit more about Dave, he is a psychotherapist and a workshop leader. He teaches at a variety of places, including Echelon and Spirit Rock Buddhist Center. He shares his time between Santa Barbara and San Francisco, California. Dave combines psychological and spiritual perspective in his work. So Dave is an author of over a dozen books, and one of them, which we're going to talk about today, called When the Past is Present, right? The title alone says so much. When the Past is Present, healing the emotional wounds that sabotage our relationships. So I know from my own personal experience and from coaching many clients, struggling in relationship and recovery is a common theme, and I hope today's episode can shine some light on how to heal from the past so you can thrive in your relationship in recovery. So, without further ado, Dr. Dave Richo, welcome to the show. Let's dive in a little bit here by sharing with me a little bit about the book, When the Past is Present, and maybe why you wrote it.
I wrote the book because I noticed that both in my own life and in the life of people I know, and certainly in the lives of my clients, there was a direct connection between what happened to us in early life and how we are and what we look for in adult relationships. And I thought it was important to, get this all out there in a book that would include practices on how to come to a place of healing for some of the wounds of the past.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I appreciate that so much because this book and your work has been, like I said, an intricate part of my healing journey, in which much of what I was suffering from was really unconscious. And I didn't know that what I experienced from childhood was playing a part in my relationship. For example, the inability for me to commit to, or just commit in general. And I think I contacted you at a very important time in my life where I was going to propose, and that's how I kind of found you and your work, and really needed to kind of open that door into correlating and making the connections between what had happened to me and how I came to be this way. So you talk about a very interesting topic, or a word that you mention early on in the book, and that is transference. And so many of us don't know what transference is. And so, for our listeners that don't know, can you explain what transference is and what it does and why?
Well, first of all, the word transference goes all the way back to Freud. He's the one who talked about this at length. It's something he noticed when he was offering therapy to his clients, psychoanalysis. He noticed that they became attached to him as a father figure, and he realized that they were looking to him for the kind of caring and reliability that they might not have found in their own fathers. And at first, he thought that this was a neurosis, an anxiety disorder. But gradually, he realized that this could be used as part of the healing. Because if they had an experience of a positive father figure, that could somewhat make up for what was missing in the patient's own childhood. Now, the point I am bringing up in the book is that transference happens all over the place, not just in the therapy room.
Hmm.
And I could, shall we say, define transference, first of all, by looking at the word itself. It comes from two Latin words. Trans in Latin means across or through, and fer, F-E-R, is the word carry, such as a ferry carries us across the water. So to transfer is to carry across, that's the trans, across, carry across the decades from childhood into adulthood the original needs that we had in our childhood. And now we believe that this new person that we've met and fallen in love with, let's say, might fulfill those original unmet needs. Or sometimes, if the needs were met, maybe this person can be trusted to keep fulfilling the needs the way our original parents did. So it can go in either direction. Either you didn't get the need fulfillment and now you're hoping to get it or believing that you can get it from a partner, or you did get it and you wanted to continue. Now, what are the needs that I'm referring to? Well, I call these the 5 A's because they all begin with A. And these are the needs that we came into the world with. Of course, we came in with many needs, but I'm zeroing in on 5 of them, and then I'll show how they apply to transference. First of all, we had a need for attention, attentiveness, because we couldn't speak. So we had to be with people who could understand what we were needing in the moment. And we did this through various forms of crying. Sometimes we needed to be held, sometimes we needed to be changed, sometimes we needed to be fed. And we had to have parents who were paying attention to us 24/7 and interpreting our needs so that we could survive.
Mm.
So obviously, our first need in life is to have somebody get us, get what we're looking for, and give it to us. And that's perfectly legitimate when you're an infant. When you're an adult, it becomes kind of dicey. You can certainly let another person know what you need, but it's up to him or her to give it to you or not. But in infancy, it's built in as a natural instinct that a parent pays attention to a child's needs, and a child comes to expect that the parent will do that. Then, since the human brain doesn't develop entirely in the womb, it continues to develop. In fact, it isn't fully developed until around age 25. But in the first months of life, the physical holding of baby and the physical affection helps the brain develop. So even on the level of biology, this particular need, the second need, the one for affection, was really important for survival and growth.
Yeah, and Dave, I just want to talk about that for a moment because I talk a lot about trauma in my work, and as I work as a trauma informed recovery coach, people don't really understand trauma. And it's a very misunderstood thing as a whole in general. But a lot of people think about sexual abuse, physical abuse, things of that nature, which, yes, of course, that is trauma. And yes, and I just want to say you were talking about more or less attunement as a mother attunes to her child. And if that attunement is not there, then that can be traumatic for the child as well. So that can live in the child's nervous system and come out in different ways later on as an adult. So I think that attunement you're referring to, that affection, is so very important. And some people don't understand that even the lack of attunement can be traumatizing for a young nervous system.
Absolutely. So, in order to pay true attention, the parent would have to attune to the child's or the infant's need. When that doesn't happen, the infant realizes that he can't trust the world that he's in.
Mhm.
And so he becomes very uh, frustrated and angry and confused, since it seems like we're instinctively wired to receive attention and affection. When it doesn't happen, it's a traumatic event. Trauma is the Greek word for wound. It's a wounding event because you're not getting what Mother Nature slated you to get.
Mhm.
So the third A is the one based on your value, and that's the need for appreciation, to be held in a way that shows that your parents truly value you. The PREC in appreciation is the Latin word for price. So to appreciate is to value the person as important. And we needed that to build our self esteem. Then we started to show personality qualities even more obviously, and we needed the fourth A, which is total acceptance, acceptance of us as we are. So if we were quiet babies, we needed to be accepted that way. If we were noisy babies, we needed to be accepted that way. If as we grew, we showed that we were more on the artistic side, that had to be okay. If we were more on the sports side, that had to be okay. It's whatever you start to exhibit as your personality and your particular way of showing who you are. We needed parents who would accept us on that basis rather than trying to make us into what they thought we should be. If they were doing that, if they were controlling us in that way, that too would have been traumatic because we would then have lost our trust that it was okay to be ourselves.
What I'm hearing you say is if you had a parent that was controlling and wanted to control you to be a certain way, other than maybe what you wanted, then that can be traumatizing?
Totally. Yeah, and very unfair because, you were born as you. You were not born as what your parent thought you should be.
Hmm. So how might that play out in the person's life in, let's just say, a negative way as they get older and mature? This is very relative. I think many people have struggled with the issue of their parent wanting them to be a certain way, but yet their hurt was in a different direction, and that tussle is conflicting.
You would feel conflicted. You would feel ashamed that you're not living up to what your parents needed you to be. And you would be angry at them for trying to mold you in a way that isn't really appropriate, authentic, or even allowable. And you might have problems with authority figures later, too.
Hmm.
And then the final A happens when instead of needing to be carried across the floor, you crawled across on your own. You showed that you were separating from your parents and you crawled away. You said no once you could speak. You said no to their commands. When it came time to go to school, you left home and went to school. Now you're showing that part of being human is separating from the parent child arrangement. And of course, you're still a child and they're still the parents, but you're starting to show that you have freedom. And that's called the need for allowing, that you needed to be allowed to go when it was time to go, even in little ways. And when your parents couldn't handle that because they had become so attached to you or needed you to fulfill their needs, then that too will bring up a conflict because I need to go, but I can't because I have to take care of my parents. And later in life, that can become I need to leave this relationship, but I can't because I need to take care of my partner. So that would be another example of how when these 5 A's, attention, affection, appreciation, acceptance, and allowing, are not fulfilled, then later in life, you will feel a bottomless pit to get them fulfilled, and you will bring that bottomless pit to your first romantic partner. And it will certainly cause conflicts in the relationship because nobody wants to give you childhood 5 A's 24/7. In adult life, we want the same 5 A's, and that's totally appropriate, but we're supposed to get them from a variety of sources, not just our partner. unlike infancy, where we only get the needs fulfilled from our parents. And if the needs were fulfilled, then in a relationship, we are satisfied with a moderate amount of need fulfillment from our partner. So we're going to be healthier in the relationship if our needs were met originally. And it's going to be difficult for us if we're still trying to fulfill childhood needs in an adult relationship. So that's the transference. We're transferring onto our partner the face of the kindly mother we wish we had had, or the kindly father we wished we had had. And as long as that transference is occurring, and it's usually unconscious, then there's a wrinkle in the relationship that's hard to smooth out.
Yeah. So you say it's transference is typically unconscious. And for those who are listening, that means that it's below your awareness. You're not aware that you're transferring the past onto the present. So that in itself becomes a challenging thing to deal with. So for our listeners, Dave, many of them who are which may be in recovery, who are in relationship and kind of connecting the dots to say, oh, okay, there's some patterns and so forth that are coming up from the past. How can they begin to make those patterns conscious and begin their process of shifting and healing so they can experience intimacy and a healthy relationship?
Well, the first way to do it is to grieve the past, to let yourself feel the feelings that go with mourning for what you didn't get. And it would take the form, like this would be a simple exercise, which I think I describe in the book, that whenever you have a memory of some way in which your parents either didn't fulfill your needs or neglected you or abused you, you let yourself go to three feelings. First, you say, how was I sad about that then? How am I sad now? And let yourself feel the sadness. Then, how was I angry about this back then? How am I angry about it now? And let yourself feel the anger. And third, how was I afraid then? And what am I afraid of now? And let yourself feel the fear. And we do this silently within ourselves, not putting it on our parents today, because the parents we're referring to are the ones that are like a locket in our heart. They are not the adult parents of today. So we're not trying to work things out with our actual parents. We're trying to work it out as our own personal business. And that could be difficult. Secondly, the continual over and over again in the course of life to let yourself have these grieving feelings, sadness, anger, and fear, gradually you notice that you receive a kind of grace and you see that you're no longer holding it against your parents for being the way they were, that you do not have any ill will toward them. You're not trying to retaliate in any way. And when you let go of ill will, blame, the need to retaliate, that's called forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean they're not accountable for what they did or didn't do. It just means that you personally no longer have that great big chip on your shoulder about them, and that you're an adult now, and whatever shape your life is going to take from here on in is your deal rather than something that you can blame on them. So becoming an adult is something like the first step in the AA program. We admitted that it's not we got it at our parents, it's we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That's a very adult statement because you're finally taking it on yourself that it's about you now. It's not about what anybody ever did to you. Some people were so terribly wounded that it is still about the parents. Those are people who were criminally harmed. That would be a small percentage of the population, but I mean, that could happen also. So we need to make room for that. And some people were so traumatized that even with all the best therapy in the world, they'll never truly get over it. Again, that's a small part of the population. And those people were harmed in horribly egregious criminal ways, rather than, what happened to most of us, which is they were controlling, they weren't paying attention to our feelings, they didn't show much physical affection, that kind of childhood. That's the kind you can work on and heal, especially in therapy, and give exercises so you can kind of work through a lot of this.
Yeah, which are so very helpful for our listeners. Obviously, we'll share more about Dave's work and literature toward the end of the show. But what I loved about working with you and your work in your books, Dave, is you actually give experiential exercises to actually shift and change and heal these parts of ourselves, which I think is so valuable. So to touch upon what we were just talking about with our parents, I remember the day that I realized my parents did the best they could with what they were dealt. And that was a freeing, liberating experience. Because before that, I held so much um, anger and resentment and putting the blame on them. But in rather shifting the blame on them, you used it in the context of, the first step. We admitted we were powerless, and yes, things happen to us, and our parents did things, but now it's our responsibility to take care of what's at hand. And when we do that, there's almost a shift in consciousness of, oh wow, like they did the best they could. Yeah, sometimes it sucked, but now it's my responsibility to feel the sadness, feel the anger, feel the fear, and let that process and integration happen so I don't bring that and transfer that into my current relationship.
That's the best. Yeah, that's one of the wonderful results of doing this kind of work, that you don't wind up putting it on your partner.
Yes, and I have had the opportunity and privilege to coach many clients who are in recovery who are struggling so deeply with connection and intimacy issues. And what I say is, you have to do your deeper trauma work, and you use the key word, which is you have to feel the sadness, you have to feel the anger, you have to feel the fear. And would you say you more or less have to process that through the body, Dave?
Yes, in fact, the unconscious is the body. It's not some chamber in your mind. Your whole body is your unconscious. And all these things that happen to us in childhood are registered in every cell of our body, so that for the rest of our lives, we carry around physically the results of how we were originally treated. And since we're not very good at reading our body's signals, we don't quite make that connection. We think it's just in the realm of memory, but
Mm.
actually, it's a body mind experience, this human journey. And so, uh, body work, somatic therapy, EMDR also helps us to get over these original traumas.
Mm.
We might say that whatever is left incomplete from childhood will look for a way to complete itself in an adult relationship. And that's not an appropriate setting for such work to happen. It's supposed to happen in your own internal world and in your work with your therapist and even in the program where you find fellowship with other people, like if you were attending CODA, for instance, you would find fellowship with other people who, carry around the same kind of wounds that you carry. And all of
Mm.
us have these wounds. It's nobody has gotten off scot free.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Nothing was ever perfect.
Mm. And Dave, it brings me to a part of your book I read, and correct me if I say this wrong, but you mentioned more or less, I believe, if you find yourself married with children and have a family before doing this type of work, it sets the stage for a very difficult relationship. Is that correct? Would you say?
Yes,
Yeah.
because you're not really ready for what it takes to be a parent until you have cleared up the major stuff that you carry around regarding your own parents. And certainly our parents didn't do this work. They didn't even know about this kind of work in most cases. And that explains why it was so difficult for them to give us a truly healthy childhood because they were just repeating what had happened to them in early life.
Mm.
Whatever is incomplete, we tend to repeat, and that repetition is the past in the present.
Mm.
We are
So
repeating the past in the present, and it's not appropriate because the present is only supposed to contain the present, not the
yeah.
past.
Which leads me to one of my favorite quotes by you: the untreated traumas of childhood become the frustrating dramas of adulthood when we transfer this past of ours onto our present. And for those that are in a relationship right now, say with a spouse or partner, and they have or don't have children, what can they begin to do to turn the ship around and do the deeper work to heal?
It would be looking for the kind of therapy that fits for you. Could be like one to one talking, could be somatic, could be EMDR, the things I mentioned.
Mhm.
And um, being in a fellowship such as a program also helps because you share with others who tell stories that are similar to yours. And trauma thrives on isolation. I'm the only one to whom this happened. So
Mm.
when you hear from others that their story is a lot like yours, you automatically feel better because you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important
And imagine how
topic.
desperate and alone we felt in childhood when nobody could understand us and we were being traumatized and there was nobody to turn to. We had no resources.
Mm.
That's the difference between a child and an adult. An adult has resources. We have somewhere else to go, whereas the 3-year-old has nowhere to go.
So, Dave, that leads me to a second book you wrote, which we're not going to get into in depth, but it's How to Be an Adult in a Relationship. And you say the 5 keys to mindful loving, which you talk about the 5 A's and that sort of stuff. But a lot of your work is based in mindfulness, consciousness, the spiritual journey. And how does mindfulness and awareness play a part in the healing journey, in particular when it comes to relationship?
If we think of mindfulness as the ability to stay in the present moment without uh, getting caught up in distractions, although we all have distractions, but in mindfulness, we try to keep coming back to our breathing and our presence in the here and now. And we do this without judgment. For instance, after you go through the, steps of I'm sad, I'm angry, and I'm afraid 100 times, you could just mindfully think of your parents without judgment, as you did when you said, well, they were doing the best they could. That puts a different spin on it. So mindfulness helps us to get into the present rather than bring the past into it. And by the way, I did want to say one thing about the phrase, the New Age phrase, they were doing the best they could, which I know is very common. And I just want to give one other spin on it. I used to say that about my parents. They were doing the best they could. Until I noticed that I myself rarely do the best I can. For instance, right now in this interview, I believe I'm doing the best I can. But when I get up from here, if I eat some potato chips, I will not be doing the best I can. I'll do the best I can if, when I get up from here and it's lunchtime, I have some lentils and rice. There I'm doing the best I can. But I start the day not doing the best I can because the dentist told me you're supposed to spend 5 minutes on your teeth. I spend maybe 40 seconds. So I'm already not doing the best I can. I get in the car and I slide through those stop signs because there's nobody around. I'm not doing the best I can. So anyway, I changed the statement from they were doing the best they can to this. They were doing the best they were willing to do.
Ah,
And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I am willing to do. And I think
okay.
that's what we're all doing. I mean, there might be somebody who's doing the best he can every single minute of every single day. Maybe one of the saints or something, like whatever. But most of us are not capable of that. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
So doing the best we're willing to do at this moment.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And to touch a little bit more about the mindfulness, and I just want to say from my own personal experience, it was only until I really begun a self-awareness practice that was I able to kind of see what was happening within me, right, as I was in relationship with my partner. And having a mindfulness practice has been a very important part of my healing journey, so I can actually see more clearly, right? In the Buddhist text, they talk about, right view, right action, right intention. And when we have this clear seeing or clear knowing due to being present and training the mind to come back to working with what is, we're less apt to bring and transfer that past onto the present situation. So for many of us in recovery, I know the 11 steps sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, is an intricate part to the path, an intricate part to healing that I didn't pay much attention to until my body was getting ill and I had to come to the moment. But mindfulness is really an invitation to see the freshness of the present moment. And when I do that, my relationship just thrives on such a different level versus getting caught up and tripped up on of spinning the web of the past. So I think you do a really beautiful job of sharing how that mindfulness really can play a part in the healing and the relationship in your book, How to Be an Adult in Relationship, Dave. I really, really appreciate that. Um,
Thank you. Mhm.
yeah, for sure. So one other thing I want to say, just because a particular client of mine is struggling with this, and it refers back to my other favorite quote by you, Dave, is what we are not changing, we are choosing.
Mhm.
So for some of us that are in relationship, and I know for myself, I stayed in a relationship long after I probably should have, but I felt a sense of responsibility or guilt for the other person. Can you talk about what you mean by what we are not changing, we are choosing, and how we can actually change?
It's that sometimes we get stuck, and maybe a good best way for me to describe this is to say that last year was my 50th anniversary as a psychotherapist, and I asked myself this question: what is the most frequent, common problem that I encountered over all these years? And the answer came to me instantly. It's staying too long in what doesn't work.
Mm, yeah.
Staying an alcoholic for 13 years instead of 1 year. And we don't blame ourselves because there's a mystery of timing. And we enter the program because we have responded to a grace. We don't come in by effort, by willpower. We come in by willingness to respond to the grace of a higher power than our own ego. But most of us have spent too long in relationships, jobs, addictions, and so forth because we didn't get it, that this was our choice. We thought we were victims, and we didn't get it that we could open ourselves to a different choice and that we were always being given the grace to do so. What is this grace? It's the grace to be able to say, I admit that I am powerless over X, Y, or Z, and that my life has become unmanageable, and that I need to turn to a power beyond my own ego to make a difference. And that has to happen within a fellowship, not just on my own. So that's why I'm such a great believer in the program, and I've seen it perform miracles with people who have, shall we say, stayed too long. And for future reference, we could say, well, I think from now on, I'm not going to stay too long. I'm going to wake up and smell the coffee and make changes. How are changes made? They're made by addressing the issue. That's the admitting. We admitted. Addressing the issue, being willing to admit what our situation is, then realizing what feelings are associated with it, and then making some decision to do things differently. And all of this, we are receiving graces to be able to do.
Mm.
So ultimately, that original trust that I talked about in childhood, which was supposed to happen when we realized that our parents could be trusted to pay attention to us rather than disregard us, hold us affectionately rather than push us aside, appreciate us rather than take us for granted, accept us rather than uh, reject us, and allow us rather than control us. We were learning how to trust. And if we didn't learn how to trust early on, then we wouldn't be able to trust a higher power now unless we could let go of our ego enough to start over. And it happens best in a community, in a program where other people support our recovery and we support theirs. So anyway, that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, I think it's so beautiful the way you compared it to the first step of AA, which I know many of our listeners here are part of 12-step fellowships. And from what you're saying is there has to be some sort of admitting and surrendering to something that is out of your control. And through connection and co-regulation of a group or with others, we can heal together. And by giving and receiving those 5 A's: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, allowance, we can begin to trust and begin to learn to say yes without resentment and no without guilt and take responsibility for ourselves and where we are at this moment,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Yes,
think
very
is,
well.
yeah, I think is beautiful, Dave. And before we wrap up here, let's just talk a moment about, I know you have a new book that just came out called Triggers: How We Can Stop Reacting and Start Healing. Right? That's your titles are pretty amazing. The titles alone just make me want to read them. So, How We Can Stop Reacting and Start Healing. Just tell us a little bit about that book and what readers can expect.
Well, it just came out, and all of these books are published by Shambhala, which is a Buddhist and self-help publisher. And the book is on why we get triggered, and I show how some of the triggers go all the way back to childhood, and some of them are related to traumas that we still haven't cleared up. And then I show how to catch ourselves with mindfulness so that we don't get triggered so uh, heavily. We lighten up on ourselves. And yeah, the book is out there and it's on Amazon, and you're welcome to follow up on it. Oh, and also my website is davericho.com, DAVERICHO, like Dave Richo.com. And on that website, I have all my books and various classes that I gave that you can download, and some YouTubes. So if anybody's interested, you're welcome to take a look.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dave. Dave's work, and Dave has been, as I said, an integral part of my healing journey. And I will be forever grateful to you, Dave, and your work. So thank you for taking the time to come on the show and really delivering your work and your message to our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike, and good luck with your work.
Thank you so much, Dave.
I admire what you're doing.
So I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Dr. David Richo as much as I did. A couple takeaways I took from today's show are: our template for relationship is created in childhood, And so that we don't make the traumas of childhood the dramas of adulthood, we have to do our deeper healing work. I know I've had to do it and I'm still doing it. And when we co-regulate with another person in safety, when we build trust and have some willingness, we can heal. I think it's also important to know that we can all heal. Healing is possible no matter what our story may be. It requires moving your feet, taking action, investing in yourself, and creating safe relationships. And when we do that, healing is possible. Because I've experienced it and it's my passion, I now bring to you my one-on-one recovery coaching program called Healing Beyond Recovery, where I take a trauma-informed approach to help people in recovery experience deeper healing, health, and wholeness. I work with a limited number of people, but currently have a couple spots open. To learn more about me and my work, please go to my webpage at www.mikegovoni.com and click Apply Now to set up a complimentary discovery call. I would love to hear from you. Once again, I want to thank you so much for listening, and no matter what your story may be, you can heal too. Until next time, happy healing and be well.